Imagine yourself at a large social gathering, where people are chatting animatedly, smiles are exchanged, and the atmosphere seems charged with energy. For many, this scenario represents the pinnacle of human connection, a space where bonds are formed and experiences are shared. But in a more distant corner, there is a solitary figure, observing everything with a serene and distant expression. This person does not seem uncomfortable or out of place, but rather indifferent to the social whirlwind around him. His gaze does not betray boredom, but rather an interest focused on something far beyond the trivialities that fill most interactions. Why do some people, especially the most intelligent and introspective, seem so oblivious to the need for socialization? What makes them see social circles not as a necessity, but as something superficial and often exhausting? Could this be arrogance, extreme introversion, or is there something much deeper behind this indifference? In this video, we'll delve into the ideas of philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most far-reaching and provocative thinkers of the 19th century. He believed that intelligence and solitude were intrinsically connected, and that the more deeply a person thinks, the less they feel the need for external distractions. Schopenhauer challenges us to question what we've always been taught. Is the need for social tools really necessary, or have we been conditioned to believe this? By the end of this video, you'll understand why some of history's most complicated minds have always opted for isolation, and how this view can transform the way you view your own interactions. Most importantly, you'll discover a powerful insight that can forever change the way you live and relate to the world. Since the dawn of civilization, humanity has valued life in society. Tribes, clans, and communities emerged as ways to ensure protection, exchange knowledge, and mutual collaboration. Survival depended on group acceptance, and isolation often meant danger or even death. Over time, this need to belong became deeply rooted in the human psyche, becoming one of the pillars of social behavior. However, there is another side to this story. Over the centuries, some of humanity's most brilliant minds have chosen to follow a different path. Philosophers, scientists, writers, and artists have often sought isolation, not out of arrogance or misanthropy, but because they understood something that most people do not. The inner world, when well cultivated, can be infinitely richer and more rewarding than any superficial interaction. Arthur Schopenhauer was one of the most profound observers of this phenomenon. He believed that true intelligence not only freed people from the need for constant socialization, but also made them more selective about the interactions they chose to have. In his work The World as Will and Representation, Schopenhauer argued that most human interactions are driven by distraction and superficiality, and that only those with a higher mind are capable of finding pleasure in their own company. For him, the empty mind seeks external stimuli to fulfill itself, while the wise mind finds satisfaction in contemplation and deep thought. And this idea was not limited to Schopenhauer alone. Other great figures in history followed suit. Isaac Newton spent years in isolation while developing his laws of physics. Nikola Tesla preferred solitude and devoted his time to exploring science. Emily Dickinson lived a virtual recluse and yet wrote some of the most profound poetry ever recorded. They all seem to understand a fundamental secret. True growth occurs through introspection, not in the constant search for external acceptance. But if this is true, why does society continue to reinforce the idea that being sociable is an absolute virtue? Is this incessant need for interaction really a natural human trait, or just an illusion reinforced by the fear of silence and self-knowledge? Schopenhauer believed that, more often than not, social life is just a theater where people play predetermined roles, hiding their true natures behind masks of convenience and social expectations. And for those who see through this illusion clearly, distancing themselves from social life is not a loss, but rather an inestimable gain. If you are enjoying this video, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving it a like. It will help me a lot. If society teaches us that being sociable is essential to happiness, why do so many highly intelligent people seem to feel the opposite? For Schopenhauer, the answer was clear. Those who think deeply do not find the same value in social interactions as most people do. He argued that much of everyday conversation is made up of trivialities, repetitions, and empty speeches that do little to enhance the intellect or the soul. He argued that most people socialize not because they want to, but because they fear silence. They seek constant distractions to avoid the discomfort of solitude, because when they are alone, they are forced to confront their own thoughts and insecurities. The truly intelligent individual, on the other hand, sees solitude as an opportunity, not a punishment. In his view, the brilliant mind does not need constant external stimulation, because it already has a rich enough internal universe to keep it occupied. This idea may seem radical, but think about your own life. How many times have you engaged in conversations that led nowhere? How many times have you felt drained after social interactions that seemed empty? For Schopenhauer, this exhaustion occurs because the intelligent mind quickly perceives the lack of depth in everyday relationships. He believed that while the average person seeks external distractions to fill their time, the truly wise person seeks self-knowledge and understanding of the world. But there is an even deeper aspect to this issue. Schopenhauer also identified that intelligence often leads to a certain degree of incompatibility with society. Highly intelligent people see patterns, analyze the hidden intentions behind words, and perceive contradictions in social norms that most people accept without question. This type of perception can make socializing tiring, as it requires a continuous effort to filter out superficialities and find moments of genuine connection. In addition, there is another factor that contributes to this disconnect. Independent thinking, often associated with intelligence, often defies collective consensus. While most people feel comfortable following norms and expectations, those who question and analyze deeply end up distancing themselves because they do not easily fit into established patterns. Does this mean that intelligence is doomed to solitude? Schopenhauer did not see it that way. For him, solitude was a privilege and a powerful tool for growth. But to truly understand this idea, we need to further explore the concept of solitude and how it differs from the feeling of being alone. While loneliness is a feeling of emptiness and abandonment, solitude is a conscious and desired state, a refuge for those who find more meaning in introspection than in superficial interactions. For him, solitude was not a punishment, but a gift. Highly intelligent people do not avoid society out of disdain or arrogance, but because they understand that true growth comes from exploring the inner world. In a world where most interactions are guided by convention and distractions, those who think deeply realize that solitude can be a sacred space for self-discovery, creativity, and mental freedom. However, this perspective goes against the social structure that has been taught to us since childhood. From an early age, we are conditioned to believe that we must fit in, be accepted, be part of groups, and avoid isolation at all costs. But what happens when we move away from these impositions and begin to see alone time as a tool for growth rather than a burden? Schopenhauer saw solitude as a means to attain wisdom and true contentment. He believed that those who relentlessly seek the company of others often do so out of fear of coming face to face with themselves. This is because the human mind, when deprived of distractions, reveals truths that can be uncomfortable, and this is precisely why most people fear silence. But if solitude is so beneficial, why do so many still struggle with it? The answer may lie in fear of the unknown. Being alone requires courage to face one's own mind, to confront thoughts, insecurities, and repressed desires. This is a process that few are willing to undertake. However, those who do discover something surprising. Solitude is not a void, but rather a space of expansion. In Schopenhauer's view, an intelligent individual who embraces solitude develops a mental autonomy that most never experience. They become free to think without outside influence, to create without the need for validation, and to live without constantly trying to fit into pre-established molds. And herein lies the great paradox. The less an intelligent person seeks external approval, the more authentic and magnetic they become. Rather than being perceived as aloof or antisocial, they often come to be seen as an enigmatic presence, someone who possesses an inner world so vast that they do not need the noise of society to feel complete. So, if solitude can be a path to freedom and personal growth, how can we learn to use it to our advantage? That is the question we will explore next. If solitude is a path to self-knowledge and personal growth, how can we use it constructively? Schopenhauer teaches that true freedom comes when we find fulfillment within ourselves, without relying on constant approval or stimulation from the outside world. In practice, this requires a conscious effort to let go of certain beliefs and develop new ways of thinking and living. The first step to embracing solitude is to change the way we view it. Instead of seeing it as an absence of connection, we should see it as a space for self-discovery. Often, the greatest ideas and revelations come in moments of silence, when the mind is not burdened by the concerns of social life. Great thinkers, writers, and inventors have used solitude to develop their works, and this same principle can be applied to anyone who wants to achieve greater mental clarity and creativity. Another key aspect is learning to be comfortable with your own thoughts. Many avoid solitude because they are afraid of what they will find when they come face to face with themselves. However, self-awareness can only be developed when we stop running away from our feelings and start facing them honestly. Practicing meditation, reflective writing, and even simply observing our thought patterns can help us better understand who we really are and what unconscious beliefs are limiting us. In addition, it is essential to replace time wasted on superficial interactions with activities that nourish the mind and soul. Instead of constantly seeking distractions, use solitude to learn something new. Deepen your knowledge in a field of interest, practice a creative skill, or simply contemplate the world around you. This process strengthens self-sufficiency and reduces the need to seek external validation. This does not mean that we should reject social life altogether. Schopenhauer did not advocate absolute isolation, but rather selectivity. He believed that it is more valuable to have a few authentic connections than to engage in countless empty interactions. Therefore, a powerful practice is to filter the relationships that add value to your life. Avoid connections based solely on convenience or obligation, and prioritize those who stimulate your mind, share genuine interests, or challenge you to grow. To truly integrate this knowledge, it is important to practice detachment from the opinions of others. The need to please others is one of the main reasons many people fear solitude. However, by recognizing that external validation is fleeting, that true fulfillment comes from within, we become less dependent on social approval and more aligned with our true essence. What happens when we learn to truly be at peace with ourselves? Life becomes easier, decisions become more authentic, and paradoxically, when we stop seeking acceptance, we become more interesting and magnetic to others.